Hello, everyone. I'm sure most of you know by now that I lost my mom last weekend. And well, it's been very hard for me to really accept that my mom is gone. I keep looking at her photos, and when I look at her, and then I can still see this gentle smile. My mother was such a gentle soul, like an angel. In fact, I've never heard my mom say something bad about anyone. In our village, in the community we come from, people used actually to talk about my mother. Nobody could understand the kind of person my mother was, because my mother was so calm, so contented, that it grieved my mother's spirit to even hear you speak ill of anyone, talk less of her. Of course, I'm from a polygamous home, and I'm thankful that our home was peaceful. But you know, in a polygamous home, you still have some friction. My mother was the first wife. Of course, the way some polygamous homes are run, when my father would buy something and then we would share the thing into two, we would always want my mother to be the first to take the first portion, because she was the first wife. And I remember my mother would always ask my stepmother to take first. And sometimes we were a little bit upset and say, and even my father used to say, take it, it's your turn, you are the first. And my mother said, no, let her take it first, because she has more children. And at a point, some of us used to think my mother's quietness was a bit of foolishness. We used to say, mommy doesn't say anything. Even when you put your hand inside her eyes, she would take it out, and not even, roughly. She would take it out gently, and we used to think it was foolishness. But it was later that we began to see what it means to have real wisdom. My mother was the most peaceful woman. I sometimes say to myself, wow, if I could be even half of the woman that my mother was, or the human being that my mother was, if I could be even one half of that, or even a quarter of that, I would consider myself blessed. My mother was so gentle that at a point, because of the church, because she was a leader in our church, she was a deaconess in our church, and there was a time they went to some big conference with in their headquarters, with people coming from all over. And my mother was so surprised when the head of the entire church, not just the section church, they called her out. And then the head, the GO, what they call the general overseer of the church, now said, you see this woman, every woman, if you want advice on what it means to be a woman of virtue, a role model, ask this woman. If you want to know what true wisdom means, this is a woman to speak. My mother was so embarrassed, because my mother was shy. I think she did her things, quietly. And she wanted to walk away, and the pastor said, no, please honor us. Let's just say what we want to say, because what we want to say is for the good. So my mother stood there, and they just praised my mother, and they called anyone who wanted wisdom to go to my mother. And my mother's life was about service to our God, first and foremost, and service to our community. My mother would go to church and clean the church, so anything that was done in church, my mother was there. If they fast, my mother was one of the first. If they had a seminar, my mother was there. Everything. I remember at a point, and we said to her, Mommy, it's not everything that you do, because it's understood that, you're older now. I mean, my mother was comfortable enough to pay someone and say, okay, clean my own, in my state, clean my own portion. But my mother would always go to church and clean when it was time to do cleaning. And sometimes, when she got there, of course, being a bit older, she couldn't really kneel or whatever for long. My mother would sit on the floor just so that she could clean things in the church. And I remember me saying, but Mom, and you can't be doing things that you used to do when you were younger. And my mother used to tell, people used to even come to her and say Big Mama, because she was called Big Mama. Actually, another name that my mother was known for was Mbakara, the fair one. They used to call her the fair one, because my mother was really like completely light skinned. I mean, my mother had hazel eyes with light blue ring. Actually, my daughter looks exactly like my mother. She's really like carbon copy of my mother. So they used to say to her, say, Big Mama, there's a fair one. Don't do this. Let someone do it for you. People will clean in your stead. And I remember my mother saying, Listen, when I ask my God to bless me, I clean his house. Is it now that he has answered my prayers and he has blessed me, will I stop to clean his house? She said, I'm doing it and I will do it for as long as I have breath. That was my mother. My mother was so against anything that any place where there was no peace. She was so contented. In fact, you know how it is where sometimes daughter-in-laws, we have friction with their mother-in-laws. My sister-in-laws today, they always say they consider themselves very blessed to have a mother-in-law like my mother. Because the thing is, my mother was the kind of woman that if she came to your home and you gave her just bread and water, and then you were eating one cow and eating caviar and drinking champagne, and then she would go back and they say, oh, how was it? How did they look after you? My mother would say, oh, they were so nice. Bless them. God bless them. They were so good to me. And it wasn't like she was trying to be, and it wasn't she was paying lip service. My mother was so contented. She was thankful. I think one of the things that I always take away about my mother was that my mother was so grateful for everything. She woke up in the morning and she was just thankful to have the sun on her face. She was just thankful for everything. A lot of people come to my home and they always say, oh, Sarah, whenever we come to your home, we always know that there'll be food. And most of them don't understand that all of this came from my mother and then my father, of course. My father, my mother, my grandmother. I always say these were the three role models in my life. I used to say my father and my grandmother, they are gone. I used to say were. My mother still is. Unfortunately, now I have to say were to three of them, including my mother. But they were really my role model. My mother would never cook for just, even if we were two in the home, my mother would never cook for 2 or 3 people. If you say, but mommy, why are you cooking all of this food? We are just 5. She would tell you, well, you never know who might walk by. You need to nurture them. You need to give them drink of water. And you need to give them food before sending them away. So she would always cook for more people than we had in the home. I've taken that from her, from my parents. I have friends who always say, Sarah, why are you cooking all of this food? Do you have a party? And I always say, oh, but maybe someone will come. And they will say, well, you always say someone will come, but if they don't come, what are you going to do with all this food? And it's happened like that I've cooked so much in the house. And then people didn't come. I've had this food. And I would just call up friends and say, you know what, I cooked this today, or I made this soup today, I made this special today, because I'm into food a lot. And I would say, okay, pass by, I'll make you a plate. Pass by, I send you off. And I always send them off with some takeaways, because this is something that's become such a part of my life. So anyway, this is just some kind of musing now. It's my way of trying to deal with the fact that my mom is not there. So it's like my musings. So I'm really calling it a tribute to my mom. In my culture, we say that people die in the eye, not in the ear. In the ears, their eyes die, but not their ears. So what it means is that even when they close their eyes, they're no longer breathing, they hear you. And so for me, this is a way of speaking into the ears of my mother and just say thank you. Thank you that I am who I am today. Any goodness people attribute to me, any ability to encourage, to be there for people, to feed people, to make people feel welcome in my home, in my presence, to be there for people, any of those things, all of those things, when people praise me, I just want to say, Mom, the credit is to you, really. It's to you. Because of the kind of person that you were, I am, really. Unfortunately, I didn't take my mommy's quietness. I'm a little bit of a crazy person sometimes. But anyway, you cannot have all the good. So that's the little part of me that's individual. That's my own little thing. But anyway, I said, I didn't take the quietness, the gentility of spirit, maybe not, but all of the good in me, they come from there because you were. They come from you, from the kind of person that you were, Mom. You really were so awesome. I'm so privileged to have been called your daughter. I'm so privileged to be your daughter still, because I know you're dead in the eyes but not in the ears. And so I'm really privileged, and I speak to you as you hear me. I know that you hear me, and your spirit is with me, with us, with your children, all the people that you left behind. You closed your eyes and slept and can't see. We really are who we are because of who you were. And so on behalf of us all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the kind of woman that you were. We used to think that your quietness sometimes, your ability to just stay silent about everything was foolishness. But I know now that you were the wisest person I will ever come across, because you lived your life. You live the Bible. You live God. You live Christ, not just by word of mouth. You just live Christ. It's been a privilege to be your daughter. So thank you.